Okay. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wa salatu wa salam ala ashraf al-anbiya'i wal mursaleen wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'een. Alhamdulillah, welcome to class 2 from our series, The Ideal Muslim, The Ideal Muslimah. Today, inshallah ta'ala, we're going to continue our discussion, and our discussion today will be centered around the Muslimah, the ideal Muslimah. So for brothers who are listening, welcome. And I just want to, just kind of reiterate what we talked about in the last class. In the last class, we talked about the ideal Muslim man. And basically that lecture was for the sisters in terms of what they are looking for in a man. All right, what the ideal Muslim man looks like. And we talked about the issue of trust. All right, the issue of trust, that a woman wants a man that she can trust. And we talked about, some of the, misnomers surrounding the issue of trust and how to build trust, what trust actually looks like in today's time. Today, inshallah ta'ala, today's discussion, we will center it on the ideal Muslimah. So this class is basically for the brothers, for them to understand. Most brothers, you hear them throw around terms like, I want a sister that is obedient, all right? And believe it or not, a lot of African-American Muslim sisters have been disqualified for marriage in the eyes of a lot of brothers because they've been stereotyped as being non-compliant and disobedient, all right? I know many brothers personally who don't want to marry African-American Muslim sisters because in their minds, African-American sisters are difficult to deal with. They're angry, they're bitter, they come with a lot of baggage, and they're disobedient, basically saying they got a mind of their own, right? In so many words. And after we finish our discussion today, I'm hoping that we'll have a different understanding of what it means to be obedient, what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what do they mean when they say that the woman is obedient to her husband? Al-salihat al-qanitat, that the righteous woman is obedient to her husband. What does that actually mean? And what does it look like in real time? And how we should understand that, and what, now after having this new understanding, what should our expectations be of women now? Or do we stick to our guns and say, well, I want a robot. I want somebody who's just going to do exactly what I say do. Don't question me. Don't question what I do. And just basically a mat. And, I just walk over top of her and, she does exactly what I tell her to do. That is not obedient. That is not what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that is not what is meant by obedience. All right. So stay tuned as we take this journey, inshallah ta'ala. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wa salatu wa salam ala ashraf al-anbiya'i wal mursaleen wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'een. So today, inshallah ta'ala, we're going to deal with the ideal Muslimah. Many men in the Islamic community throw around this term obedient, right? An obedient wife. I want a sister that is obedient. I want a sister who is, who adheres to being obedient to her husband. All right. We kind of just throw these terms around one generation to the next. New convert comes into Islam, right, and has absolutely no understanding of what an obedient wife is supposed to look like. He hears other brothers, kind of regurgitating this term, and he just latches onto it, right? He latches onto it, and now it becomes a part of his jargon. Yeah, I want a sister that's obedient. You see how that happens? You see how a brother who knows absolutely nothing about this, he comes into Islam, he hears other brothers in a conversation talking about, man, sisters ain't obedient. I need an obedient sister. I need a bint that's going to be obedient, and all this other, slang and term in the Islamic community that you hear thrown around in some of these circles and some of these conversations. So this is a new shahada, a new convert, and he now begins to regurgitate the same jargon. I want a sister that's obedient. You go to the sit down and the sister's asking the brother, well, what are you looking for in a wife? And, his first words are, I'm looking for a sister who's obedient. And, some of you sisters, because you're so desperate for a husband, you sit there and say, inshallah, I'm obedient, Like, why are you doing that to yourself? Are you that desperate? You that desperate to let another man's desires dictate to you what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala meant when he said obedient? A man's desires does not dictate that, right? We mean that they have to obey us in everything that is halal, even that which is makruh. Okay. I want you to, because that's exactly the mentality that I'm talking about. Brother Waqar, no disrespect to you. That's your understanding. We are having, this conversation so that we can arrive at a more deeper understanding. That's very shallow. Very shallow. That she is supposed to obey me in everything that is halal. What you are not saying is that she doesn't have a mind of her own. As long as you lead with the fact that it's halal, she doesn't have a right to question you. That's basically what you're saying. As long as you are leading with, well, it's halal, it's not haram. That is all the justification that you need for her to put her mind, her brain on pause, right? And just do exactly what you say without challenging your authority on anything. And that is not what is meant by obedience. All right? Obedience is a conscious and willful compliance. We need to change our language. What is requested of the Muslim woman is conscious and willful compliance. That is what obedience means. Meaning she's making a conscious effort after, receiving the command and instruction from her husband. She's processing that. And then after processing that, she willfully, out of her own desire. You understand? She needs to be obedient to Allah and the deen so we can build a serving family. MashaAllah. Well, we're going to bring it all out today. Sisters, I hope you're paying attention. We're going to bring it all out today. We're going to bring it all out. Inshallah. That's the purpose. My job here is not to tell anybody they're wrong. I'm just trying to give you another way of looking at it, man. You are entitled to run your household, run your family, however you please. I'm saying for those of us who want a more deeper understanding of our religion and of the commandments and instructions of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I'm just here to offer that. If you don't, you know what I mean? Like if this doesn't work for you and I'm talking rubbish, this doesn't, sit well with you, then you are entitled to run your home the way that you want. Right. Okay, so let's talk. So most men, if not all men in the Islamic community, throw around this term obedient, right? Without the parameters that are necessary to make it more realistic, both socially and religiously. So we throw around the term obedience, right? Without the necessary parameters. There are parameters to, a woman being, obedient to her husband. And I'm almost like very uncomfortable even using that phrase, but I'm using it. I'm using it only because that is the jargon in the Muslim community. That's the jargon in the Muslim community. So I'm going to use it for the sake of argument, right? So we throw around the term obedient, but we don't look at the parameters that are surrounding this term that makes it necessary for us to understand it, make it realistic both socially and religiously. So we'll look at this from two perspectives, from a social perspective and from a religious perspective, okay? Because that is what our entire lives comprise of. We have the religious component and then we have the social component. Right? Mecca was the religious component. Medina was the social component. Medina was the social component. Look at how our deen is set up. In the Meccan period, in the 13 years, driving home, Aqidah, theology, understanding of Allah, respect for his guidelines, his rules, and then migrate to Medina. Now we begin to put clothes on, we begin to build the social infrastructure. The impermissibility of alcohol, impermissibility of prostitution, impermissibility of fornication and adultery, impermissibility of a man, denying his children or associating somebody with his family that is not part of his biological family to the end of it. That is all the social infrastructure of Medina. So our entire deen revolves around these two components, right? Deen and social. All right. So the way obedience is interpreted today in the Islamic community is that a woman, and you guys, if you pay attention to what some of the brothers just said, I don't even have to say anymore. That is exactly how most Muslim men view the term obedience. That is interpreted today as a woman who has no life of her own. That's number one. That when a woman is obedient, we interpret that in the Islamic community as the woman has no life of her own, right? She lives vicariously through the successes and the failures of her husband. Meaning she has no life of her own. Wherever her husband succeeds, that defines her success. And wherever her husband fails, that defines her failure. She is like the invisible woman because of her obedience, right? She lives vicariously through the successes and failures of her husband, a woman who follows a script that has been handed to her. I'm going to hand you a script. When you marry me, I'm going to hand you a script. And you are going to follow this script, right? And the script, right? And she serves no other purpose in the marriage other than to hold the pen while her husband writes the relational narrative with the ink of his own actions, both accomplishments and failures. Both accomplishments and failures. Yeah. Ben, check the Wi-Fi, please. The Facebook Live just stopped. I don't know why. All right. Well, it started again. All right. So I'll say that again. Right. So the way obedience is interpreted in the Islamic community is that the woman has no life of her own, right? She lives vicariously through the successes and the failures of her husband. She follows a script that has been handed to her, and she serves no greater purpose in the marriage other than to hold the pen while her husband writes the relational narrative with the ink of his actions, both successes and failures. You can't marry somebody like that? Well, wake up, because majority of the men in the Islamic community hold this thought, hold this belief right here. When the word obedience is said, this is what is playing out in the mind of a man. This is what is playing out. So this sends a signal. When a man says, I need a woman that's obedient, this is what is going through most men's minds. You understand? The only purpose you serve as a woman in your marriage is to hold the pen while your husband writes the narrative of your marriage with his successes, his failures, and the only purpose you serve is to hold that pen for him. That's it. We don't realize that as a Muslim woman in her marriage, she garners just as much authority in the marriage as the man does. I'm going to give you an ayah from the Quran. I'm going to give you an ayah from the Quran that dispel this whole idea that my authority is here and her authority is here. Or she doesn't have any authority at all. I am the sole authority. No, all men are not. I'm not saying all men. I'm saying many men in the Islamic community, including myself when I first became Muslim, because I didn't know who knows what Islamic terminologies mean when you first become a Muslim. When you first become Muslim, when you are a new convert to Islam, you are walking into an already made community with its own language, its own culture, everything. So you just adapt because you don't know, you don't have enough knowledge to know that, no, that's not what that means. You know what I We don't know. So we don't combat that. And it takes us a whole journey of learning and sitting in lectures and, watching other marriages crumble because of this misnomer, this misunderstanding. And then we finally come to the realization that that can't possibly be what obedience to your husband means. That can't possibly be what it means. Can't possibly, because I haven't seen it work. If that is the understanding of the woman being obedient to her husband, I haven't seen it work. And the plethora of divorces in our communities are evidence, cold hard facts to prove that it doesn't work. You understand? So what we don't realize is that in the Islamic community, the Muslim woman garners just as much authority in the marriage as the man does. I dare a man to challenge me on that. Women have the same amount of authority in the marriage as the man does. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in surah number 2, ayat 228. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in surah al-Baqarah, surah number 2, ayat 228. وَلَهُنَّ مِثْلُ الَّذِي عَلَيْهِنَّ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ, that the women have similar rights to the rights over them. Meaning men and women have the same rights in the marriage. وَلَهُنَّ مِثْلُ الَّذِي عَلَيْهِنَّ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. Women have the same rights that the men have. وَلِلرِّجَالِ عَلَيْهِنَّ دَرَجَةً, and the men have just a degree above them. Just a degree above them. And that degree is in responsibility and accountability. But look at the ayah. Allah says very clearly that women have the same rights that the men have in the relationship. So why is it that men believe that, obedience to the husband, like there are areas in our lives where we have to turn that over to our women. They know better. The scholars, they have a saying, الَّذِي يَعْلَمْ حُجَّ عَلَى الَّذِي لَا يَعْلَمْ. The one who knows is proof over the one who doesn't know. If there's an area of, in terms of childcare, in terms of, finances and things like that, that your wife is more knowledgeable of, she is a hujjah over you. She is a proof over you. You understand? You're ignorant as it relates to that. Just because you make the money, but you don't know how to spend the money. You spend it frivolously. You late on bills. You don't have money for bills because you're using your money unwisely in areas. And your wife, she is, the saver, the penny pincher, the one who understands how finances should be managed. And we'll dismiss that because I am the authority. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَهُنَّ مِثْلُ الَّذِي عَلَيْهِنَّ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ, and women have rights that are similar to the rights that are against them. وَلِلرِّجَالِ عَلَيْهِنَّ دَرَجَةً, and the men have a degree over them. The men have a degree over them. All right, so Abdullah bin Abbas, he was given the nickname Tarjuman al-Quran, the interpreter of the Quran. The interpreter of the Quran. There was none more knowledgeable amongst the youth of the Sahaba, radiallahu ta'ala anhum, more knowledgeable of the Quran. After Abu Bakr, radiallahu ta'ala anhu, there was none more knowledgeable of the Quran than Abdullah ibn Abbas. Abdullah ibn Abbas said, as it relates to this ayat, he said, إِنِّي لَا أَطْلُبْ مِنْ زَوْجَتِي جَمِيعِ حَقِّي مَخَافَةً أَنْ تَطْلُبْ مِنِّي جَمِيعِ حَقِّهَا. He said, I do not ask my wife for all of my rights out of fear that she may ask me for all of her rights. I don't get into this whole my rights, your rights. Don't get into that. Because if we play the my rights card, in fact, the women probably have more rights than we have in a marriage. Our rights as men, they are consolidated, but it has depth to it. Women have rights, and there are so many of them. Financial, sexual, emotional, to the end of it. To the end of it. So don't get into the my rights game, playing the my rights card. You don't want to play that. Abdullah bin Abbas, he said, I do not ask my wife for all of my rights out of fear that she would ask me for all of her rights. This is Abdullah bin Abbas and his interpretation of that ayah. Allah says that the women have rights similar to the rights that are against them. Equal rights in the marriage. Women have rights similar to the rights of the men. All right? And Abdullah bin Abbas, in his interpretation of that ayah, he said, I do not ask my wife for all of my rights out of fear that she would ask me for all of her rights. Because if the woman was to turn around and ask you for all of her rights, you're in trouble. You're in trouble as a man. So when we play this, I'm taking a second right. It's my right. It's my haq. You understand? Very good, Brother Abdul Kareem. Men have simple rights and women have rights that are complicated. Very complicated. Absolutely. Absolutely. You spot on, Brother Abdul Kareem. So if you want to start saying, well, my rights, if the woman did the same thing, we would be in trouble. All right? So we have to understand that the concept of obedience from an Islamic standpoint, right? From an Islamic standpoint, and then we have to understand it from a social point of view. And the Islamic standpoint is theoretical because everybody is not there. You understand? Everybody is not there. From an Islamic standpoint, we're going to look at it theoretically because everybody is not there. So when we say a woman has to be obedient, if in your interpretation of being obedient, okay, that's theoretical because she might not be there. She might not be able to meet your expectation of being obedient. You understand what I'm saying? So that's theory. Then we have to look at it from a social perspective, which is the practicality of it. The practicality of it and how realistic this is. Islamically, obedience doesn't mean submissiveness. In Islam, a woman being obedient doesn't mean that she is submissive. That's not what that means. It means there is a willful and conscious compliance. You understand? There's a willful and conscious compliance. But obedience in Islam for a Muslim woman does not mean she is submissive. Our submission is only to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Complete, absolute submission is to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. As it relates to another human being, there's obedience, but there are parameters. There are limits. So therefore, the term obedience as it applies to God and His Messenger does not mean the same thing as it applies to a woman being obedient to her husband. You understand? It does not mean the same thing. Obedience to Allah and His Messenger is complete submission. Allah says in the Quran, وَمَا كَانَ لِمُؤْمِنٍ وَلَا مُؤْمِنَةٍ إِذَا قَضَى اللَّهُ وَرَسُولُهُ أَمْرًا أَن يَكُونَ لَهُمُ الْخِيَرَةُ مِنْ أَمْرِهِمْ. It is not befitting for believing male, believing female, when Allah and His Messenger have decided a matter, that they have any say-so in it. That is submission. Complete obedience. The same thing does not apply to another human being. It is not befitting for believing male, believing female, when Allah and His Messenger, when God and His Messenger have decided on a matter, that they have any say-so in it. You understand? And some men take obedience to mean the same exact thing that it applies to them. When I command my wife to do something, as long as it is halal, she does not have a right, she does not have a choice in the matter. You understand? That does not apply to another human being. So let me get this straight. Let me break it down a little further for you. So if a man goes out and commits adultery with a woman, right? He goes out and he commits adultery with a woman. He goes out and let's say He marries a second wife. He marries a second wife, didn't tell his first wife anything. Right? And then he comes home and he tells his wife, I need to see you in the bedroom. That's halal. It's halal for them to have sexual relations. Does she have to obey him? And I'm using this as an example because I just received an email about this. You understand? A brother goes out, he marries a second wife, says nothing to his first wife about it. He doesn't get an STD test. He doesn't get an AIDS test. He doesn't get any medical examination whatsoever. Marries her, consummates the marriage. The wife finds out. He comes home to his first wife and he tells her, I need to see you in the bedroom. You cannot deny me sexual relations. Are you telling me that the Muslim woman under the term obedience does not have a right to refuse? She doesn't have a right to refuse? You have got to be kidding me. You have got to be kidding me. You have got to be kidding me. She doesn't have a right to refuse. So you can go out and you can sleep with whoever you want to sleep with. Your wife finds out about it. You come home and say, I'm sorry. Well, I want to have sex now. And she's supposed to obey you because it's halal. It's your right. No. She doesn't obey you. She has a right to protect herself. She has a right to protect herself from the herpes that you just contracted. She has a right to protect herself. You have some women who believe they don't have a right to refuse. That is submission. That type of submission is only for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. She has a right. She has every right to refuse you. And she doesn't need dalil to refuse you. But I'll give you the dalil for all of you dalil followers when it's convenient for you. We got a whole bunch of selective Sunnah Muslims. Selective Sunnah Muslims. We want dalil when we believe we are in the right. But we don't want the dalil. So we just say, give me the dalil. We'll bring you the proof. Right? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said to Bani Israel, Allah says, وَإِن يَرَوْا كُلَّ آيَةٍ لَا يُؤْمِنُوا بِهَا. That if they saw every sign, you gave them every proof, they still not going to believe. So sometimes you guys just asking for proof, asking for dalil is just a smoke screen for you to keep doing what you're doing under the hope that the person cannot find dalil. Because even when the dalil is presented to you, you ain't going to follow it anyway. You understand? You're not going to follow it anyway. Even if I gave you the dalil, you're still not going to follow it. Then we go, well, what scholar said that? Well, hello, scholars are not dalil. Understand your deen. You've been sitting in all these classes all this time, listening to all of this regurgitated verbiage, right? Rubbish. And then you got the nerve to say, well, what scholar said that? A scholar saying it is not dalil. I wouldn't give a damn what scholar it was. A scholar saying it is not dalil. You don't know what dalil is? Oh, well, which one of my sheikh said that? It's like, man, I'm not even having this conversation with you, man. I got to tell you what scholar said this in order for you to comply. I tell you Allah said it, his messenger said it, and you telling me what scholar said it so you can, act upon it? So you can at least begin to process it? That's that cult behavior, man. And, you start asking questions like that, you've been indoctrinated. You've been indoctrinated. If the word that comes out of your mouth is, well, what scholar said that? Then that's how you know you've been indoctrinated. Because dalil in our religion is Allah said, his messenger said. The Sahaba did. The Sahaba said. The ijma', the consensus of the scholars, they unanimously agree on this issue, that issue. That is dalil in our deen. A scholar saying it, one individual scholar saying it, especially if he's a contemporary scholar. Nobody uses contemporary scholars as dalil. Are you kidding me? A contemporary scholar who's still alive? MashaAllah. You already know what you're dealing with. Anyway, keeping it moving. All right, so obedience Islamically, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his messenger has one meaning, and obedience to your husband has a completely different meaning. It means two completely different things. And if we say that obedience to Allah and his messenger is, unconditional, you don't have a right to refuse, that same understanding of obedience does not apply to another human being. There are parameters. There are conditions. So therefore, it is not something that is, submission to another human being. That's not what it means. That is what it means when it applies to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his messenger. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. But as it relates to a woman and her husband, that's not what it means. All right? It is a conscious and willful compliance. Conscious and willful compliance. All right? When a man asks his wife to do something, her response to his request is based upon a number of things. So let me give you the rundown. Let me give you the conditions. And then you tell me if obedience to the husband means the same thing as obedience to Allah and his messenger. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. You tell me if it means the same thing. So, I just read to you an ayah from the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that it is not befitting for believing male, believing female, when Allah and his messenger have decided in a matter that they have any say-so. That means that we have no choice. Allah commands us to wear the hijab, you wear the hijab. You don't say, it's my choice. You don't have a choice when it comes to hijab. I mean, you do, but your choice, has an accountability attached to it. Those who believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam don't believe that they have a choice because they understand that obedience to Allah and his messenger is unconditional. Unconditional. However, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands us to, stay away from this or stay away from that, we don't have a choice in the matter. When a man commands his wife to do something, she has a choice in the matter. There's a choice there. That is not unconditional. There's a choice. So when a man, asks his wife to do something, her response to his request is based upon a number of factors. Number one, her recognition of his role in the marriage. Her recognition of his role in the marriage. He is my husband. All right? She sees his position in the marriage, and that is provided that he is doing in his marriage what validates him having that position. You understand? Because a man can't come into a marriage, he doesn't work, he doesn't help around the house, he doesn't take care of the kids, he doesn't do anything and still, garner that level of authority and respect in the marriage. It doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that. No human being is going to give you, that status if it's not earned. I mean, not necessarily earned, but, maintained. Allah gave you the status. You got that. Coming in to the marriage, you got that. But how do you maintain that? Allah gave you that. You have that status as the patriarch of your family. But how do you maintain that? If you are not doing what it takes to maintain that, then obviously the woman is not going to see you in that light. The woman is not going to see you in that light. All right, so number one, she recognizes his role in the marriage. Number two, there's a willingness to cooperate for the greater good of the marriage, the cohesion of the marriage, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَتَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْبِرِّ وَالتَّقْوَى وَلَا تَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْإِثْمِ وَالْعُدْوَانِ. To cooperate with one another upon righteousness and piety. Cooperate with one another upon righteousness and piety. So there is a willingness to cooperate, right? For the greater good of the family, for the cohesion of the family. All right. So number one, when a man requests his wife to do something, there is a recognition of what happened. There's a recognition of, his position, his role and status in the relationship. Can you check the Wi-Fi again? This thing just keeps going out. Or can you put your hotspot on? This thing just keeps going in and out. You putting yours on? Yeah. All right, it's back on now, but it just keeps going in and out. Yeah, I'm trying to fix it. Give me a second. It might be my Wi-Fi. For those of you who are on Facebook Live, we're on Periscope. So if you would like to come over to Periscope, you can go find it on Periscope, inshallah. All right, so when a man commands his woman to do something or, asks her, requests from her to do something, there are a number of factors that it has to be, it has to be filtered through. The filtering process. Number one, she recognizes his role in the marriage, right? She recognizes his role in the marriage. I'm just reiterating because I know it froze for you guys on Facebook. So I'm just reiterating again so you don't miss anything. All right? Let me see if it'll just... Which one is yours?
7.
No, still connected to 629. Okay. All right. All right. So, all right, we connected. We should be good now. All right. So when a woman asks when a man asks his wife to do something, that command is filtered through a number of processes. Number one, she's looking at his role in the marriage, his position in the marriage, right? She's looking at his position in the marriage. All right. And obviously Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave the man a role and gave the woman a role in the marriage. However, coming into the marriage, the man is automatically given that. It just went off again. This is just horrible, man. Just keeps going in and out. Yeah. It's raining here, so that might have a lot to do with it. So I got to keep going. All right, so looking at his position or his role in the marriage. Number two, her willingness to comply, her willingness to cooperate. She has to willfully want to cooperate. Why, as a man, would you want a woman to listen to you, even though in the back of her mind and in her heart, she really does not want to comply with that? There has to be a willful compliance, a willful cooperation. As Allah says in the Quran, وَتَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْبِرِّ وَالتَّقْوَى, cooperate with one another upon righteousness and piety. Number three, the request having some root in the religion, right? The request that the husband is making to his wife has to have some root in the religion. Right? She doesn't have to obey you. She doesn't have to listen to you or comply with your, your command, or request if it's not something that is rooted in the religion. And number four, it doesn't involve disobedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As the Prophet ﷺ said, "La ta'ata li makhluqin fi ma'siyatil khaliq," that there's no obedience to the creation and disobedience to the Creator. So those are four things. That's a filtering process. That when a man asks a woman to do something, she's going to filter it through those four things. Number one, his role. Does he deserve to be, complied with? Does he even deserve that? Does he even deserve for you? Is he deserving of you complying with that? Number two is her willingness to cooperate. Her willingness to cooperate. Number three, the request having some root in the religion. Right? It has to be rooted in the deen. And number four is that the request does not involve disobedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. As the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "La ta'ata li makhluq fi ma'siyatil khaliq." There's no obedience to the Creator and disobedience to the creation. Meaning that if a man asks a woman to do something that is disobedient, displeasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, she does not have to obey you. So that is not obedience. It is a willful and conscious compliance. A willful and conscious compliance. She's still using her brain, brother. Obedience, the person is not using their brain. They're just complying. When we obey Allah and His Messenger, we don't ask why or how. That's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded us to do. That's what His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam instructed us to do. Sami'na wa ta'ana. We hear and we obey. That's obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. As it relates to another human being, it's like, okay, all right, hold up. Hold up. Let me process this. You want me to do what? Let me process this. You want me to shut up? Shut up and just obey your husband? Stop talking? Stop talking? I have to stop talking? Number one, looking at your position as a man in the relationship. Number two, am I even willing to do that? Number three, is there some root in the religion? Do you have any dalil for me to shut up because you don't want to talk no more? And number four, do I have to obey that? Do I have to obey you? Do I have to shut up? Like, if I don't shut up, is that a sin before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? If I decide to shut up, if I decide to stop talking, it is because I am willfully and consciously complying because I'm looking at all of these other issues. You understand? Absolutely. You use your brain. All right? So with all of these conditions, right, can we even use the term obedience? Is that what is requested of a Muslim woman as it relates to her husband? When the Prophet ﷺ says things like, لو أمرت أحدا أن يسجد لأحد لأمرت المرأة أن تسجد لزوجها, that if I was going to command anyone to prostrate to anyone, I would have commanded a woman to prostrate to her husband. When the Prophet ﷺ says things like that, he's trying to use that metaphorically to show you the degree of, authority that the man has. But just as many, statements of the Prophet ﷺ that shows the man's, degree of authority in a relationship, we can use just as many texts to show the position of authority of a woman in a relationship. I can pull, just as many hadith to show the same thing on the side of the woman. A woman divorced her husband, and the Prophet, she came to the Prophet ﷺ, she said, Ya Rasulullah, man ahaqqun nas ala waladi. Who has more right to this child? Woman was divorced by ﷺ after being divorced by her husband. She said, O Messenger of Allah, who has more right to this child? Me or my husband? Who has more right to this child? What did the Prophet ﷺ say? He said, Anti ahaqqu bi waladik ma lam tatazawwaji. He said, you as a woman have more right over this child than your ex-husband does. So as long as you do not remarry, you have more right. And we still divorce the woman, and I'm taking my kids. How you taking your kids? The Prophet ﷺ clearly said she has more right to the child than you do. You understand? And if the woman has more right to the child in the event of divorce, who do you think has more right to the child while y'all married? Who you think has more right to the child while you're married? I don't want you taking my kids here. Sister going to her friend's house. I don't want my kids over there. They got a TV in the house. So you pulling rank now. You pulling rank. You didn't ask. You didn't say, you know what, babe? I know you like going to your friend's house, and I respect that. But we're grooming our children to be a certain way. We're nurturing, cultivating our children in a certain way. Do you think that taking them there would conflict with, the parenting style that we have with our children? You understand? You see the difference in that? And then let the woman say, you know what? I never thought about it like that. Maybe I should just leave the baby here. Or, nah, I don't think it's cool because, I make sure that when I'm there, she doesn't do this or she doesn't play that or whatever the case may be. Cool. That's a willful and conscious compliance, not a dictatorship. Don't take my kids here. I don't want my kids at your mother's house. I don't want my kids going to this school or that school. Right? Just pulling rank. The Prophet ﷺ said in the event of divorce, right, that the man has more right, the woman has more right to the child than the man does. That's in the event of divorce. What about when they're in the institution of marriage? This is along with the fact that the man is usually the breadwinner, along with the fact that usually the man is the one that is going to go remarry and establish. The woman is going to remain single for a particular period of time. And the Prophet ﷺ still said that the woman has more right to the child. Not all men know how to speak because of a lesser vocabulary. Vocabulary has nothing to do with it. When we say that my wife is supposed to obey me, that comes with a whole culture and mentality. Language and culture are intertwined with one another. You cannot separate. So when we use this language, it conveys a whole culture. So the reason is not that the brother doesn't have the vocabulary to communicate with his wife. The reason is that when we married her, we believe that she owes me obedience, and that created a whole mentality on how we even view her. Until it's like it conveys a whole mentality on how we even view the woman from the very beginning. From the very beginning. If we had, the understanding of willful and conscious compliance, rather than obeying a law being equivalent to obeying her husband, right? If we had that mentality instead of that mentality, then we would automatically know how to communicate with our women. We would automatically, because we would see them as equals. Because we would see them as equals in the marriage, rather than subordinates. We see our wives as subordinates. You are here to obey my commands and do nothing more, nothing less. Right? And then we use the religion to justify it. And then we wonder why when the sister gets divorced, she takes off everything. She blames the religion for how the man has treated her in that situation. Because most of the time, the bad treatment, the horrible treatment the woman experienced at the hands of her husband, he was using the religion to justify it. You understand? You guys follow me? So many sisters are divorced and they leave Islam. They don't just leave the marriage. They leave Islam because they blame the religion for all of the horrible experiences that she had in that situation, because 9 times out of 10, the man was using Islam to justify the horrible treatment he was given to this woman. So with all of these conditions, we should be able to see that the term obedience, which we throw around very loosely, does not connote or convey absolute subservience. It's not an absolute subservience to the husband. From an Islamic perspective, we already did that. Islamically, we're done. I don't need to say nothing else. I don't need to say anything else after that. Islamically, it does not mean, obedience does not mean what we thought it meant. When we look at the Sahabiyat, now let me give you some more examples. When we look at the Sahabiyat, the women of the companions, all right, because these are our examples, right? We like to be religious. So let me take you into the religious texts. When we look at the Sahabiyat, the women of the Sahaba, right? When all of our men right now who had this mentality that obedience of your wife to you meant that she doesn't have a mind of her own, she doesn't have a right to refuse your commands, and as long as it's halal, she has to obey you. When we look at the Sahabiyat, do we find that same mentality conveyed to us in the examples of the Sahabiyat with their husbands? No, we don't. No, we don't. And when we look at our interpretation of obedience to the husband, do we find that being conveyed in the stories and in the examples that we find in the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. We don't find, it's not lining up. It's not lining up
Our understanding of what a woman is supposed to be like with us in a marriage is not lining up with the examples of the Sahabiyat and their husbands in their marriage. It's not lining up. Otherwise, we wouldn't have such an influx of divorces and horrible examples of marriage in our communities. When you look at the Prophet's community, divorce was an exception to the rule, not the rule. And this is one of the things that I talk about in my upcoming book, Blended Families. I have a whole chapter in there, the culture of divorce. The culture of divorce. The Sahabiyat, in the early generation of Islam, divorce was an exception to the rule, not the rule. Today, it is the rule. Because we feel like when I'm not getting what I need from this situation, I'm out. There's no more need for the woman. No more need for this marriage. Because I am not getting what I need from this situation. Sounds like narcissism. When we look at the Sahabiyat, we can see that the women were not forced to fit into this narrow understanding of obedience that we all superimpose on our women. They were allowed to keep their own individual personalities. However, alter them based upon the dictates of the religion with respect to moral character and the needs of the relationship, not fear of divorce or domestic abuse. I'll say that again. Let me say it again for the people in the back that didn't hear me. When we look at the examples of the Sahabiyat, the female companions of the Prophet ﷺ, the wives of the Sahaba, when we look at them and their examples, we can see that these women were not forced to fit into this narrow understanding of spousal obedience. Pay attention. This understanding of obedience to the husband that we have, that we throw around very loosely, when we look at the examples of the Sahabiyat, we don't find that they were forced to fit into, right? They wasn't forced to fit into this narrow understanding of obedience that we all but superimpose on our women in this day and time. All right? These women, the Sahabiyat, were allowed to keep their personalities. Who they were was who they were. They weren't forced to change who they were when they married or when they converted to Islam. However, they were encouraged to alter their behaviors, to alter their personalities based upon the dictates of the religion with respect to moral character and the needs of their relationship. Every relationship needs some patience. Every relationship needs some, willful and conscious compliance. They were forced to alter. They were encouraged to alter their personalities and their behaviors to align it with the moral character, the excellence of moral character that Islam encouraged, as well as the needs of their relationship. Not out of fear of being divorced or, fear of domestic abuse. Our women are forced to change in their marriages today, right? And they're forced to change because they are in fear of being divorced. If you don't stop talking back to me like that, this marriage ain't gonna really work. So now she's forced to change her behavior out of fear of divorce. Not because, that behavior is not aligned with the character of a Muslimah in Islam. And that behavior is going to ruin our relationship. No man is going to stand for that. So the woman is now forced to kind of look at herself and look at how self-sabotaging, her behavior is in her marriage. Not, if I don't change, he's going to divorce me. Or if I don't change, he's going to beat me. If I say something else, he's going to punch me in my face, right? Don't obey me, I'm divorcing you. You're absolutely right, Sister Aaliyah. You're absolutely right. Don't obey me, I'm divorcing you. Or even worst case scenario, I'm going to beat you. I'm going to beat you into submission, right? You don't want to listen. I don't know what you did with your last husband, but that ain't going to work here. I beat my women. I put hands on my women, right? So let me give you some examples. I said something, and now I'm going to follow it up with some examples. Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, first thing is that their culture dictated what obedience to the wife, right? Are we really this bad? Absolutely. We really are. We really are. For those that it applies to. And I'm saying I know this exists because I used to be like that. When I first converted to Islam and I first got married, I used to be like that because I adopted the belief that my wife has to obey me, do exactly what I tell her to do. And if she doesn't, I'm going to divorce her. Absolutely. Absolutely. That was my mentality. That was my mentality. That's how I know. Because I didn't come into Islam with that mentality. I was a non-Muslim. And I didn't function like that in Jahiliyyah. I wasn't even, like that wasn't my demeanor, before I became Muslim. I wasn't overprotective of women. You know what I mean? Like my mentality was, if you can take her from her, then you can have her. She ain't mine. I wasn't overprotective. I wasn't insecure. That wasn't my mentality. I adopted that mentality once I became a Muslim, because I adopted that from the mentality of the Muslim men that were in the community that I was a part of. Real talk. And then you got to go on this whole journey to kind of wean yourself off of this and start seeing your wife as a freaking human being that has just as much say-so in your relationship as you do. So you got to start, cleaning out your closet, this mental closet that we have of believing these beliefs that we have adopted, from, this jargon, all from this one word, obedience. Has a whole culture attached to it. My wife has to be obedient. No, it's not. It's not, Sheikh Abdul Rahman. It's not us trying to adopt somebody else's culture. Although it is somebody else's culture, it's when we come into Islam, we have to apostate from our own culture and adopt, whatever is given to us. We're not even allowed to keep the good of our own culture and bring it with us into Islam. Even though the Prophet ﷺ said, خِيَارُكُمْ فِي الْجَاهِلِيَّةِ خِيَارُكُمْ فِي الْإِسْلَامِ إِذَا فَقِهُوا, that the best of you in Jahiliyyah will be the best of you in Islam, provided you get an understanding of the religion. Most men think that if they don't rule with a heavy hand, they're punk. No, those type of men, Sister Aliyah, are insecure men. These are men that are overcompensating for their insecurity, that they have to rule with a heavy hand. A real man never has to rule with a heavy hand. The Prophet ﷺ was the most real man that you can come across of. He never ruled with an iron fist because he was secure in who he was. There were incidents that we're going to cover that his wives used to talk back to him. His wives used to boycott him for a whole day. You know what I mean? And yeah, he was frustrated, but he never ruled with a heavy hand because this was a man that was secure in his manhood. But when you insecure and you start to think, I'm a punk, she ain't going to run over me. Oh, she just thinks she going to do this. That's an insecure man. So you rule with a heavy hand, overcompensating for your insecurity. All right. So Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, we're not going to be able to get through all of this. It really entirely too much, man. But Umar bin Khattab radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he said that نحن معشر أهل مكة معشر قريش كنا نغلب نساءنا فلما انتقلنا إلى مدينة وجدنا الأنصار أناسا يغلبهم نساؤهم فطفق نساؤنا and taghlibna. Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, pay attention to this statement of Umar bin Khattab radiallahu ta'ala anhu. He's giving us a glimpse. He's giving us a glimpse at some of their culture. Arab culture, pre-Islamic Arab culture. Pay attention. Umar said, Nahnu ma'ashara Quraysh. He said, we the people of Quraysh, meaning the people of Mecca. Because when they migrated to Medina, they still tried to keep their identity. So they would always identify themselves as Qurayshi, right? Because you're living in a new environment. They had to migrate from Mecca to Medina. They didn't want to lose their identity. They were still tribal. Nothing wrong with that, right? But Umar said, Nahnu ma'ashara Quraysh. We the people of Quraysh, meaning the people of Mecca, Meccans. Kunna naglibu nisa'ana. We were more aggressive than our women in Mecca. We were more aggressive than women in Mecca. Inshallah, the book will be out on Saturday. The Blended Families book will be available Saturday, inshallah. I will be at Masjid Taqwa on Saturday, inshallah ta'ala, Saturday afternoon, bi'idhnillah. I'll be over at Masjid Taqwa, so if you're in the New York area, you're in the Brooklyn area, come out and get your copy of Blended Families, inshallah. All right? Umar radiallahu anhu, he said, we the people of Quraysh, meaning the Meccans, the people of Mecca, kunna naghlibu nisa'ana. We were more aggressive than our women. You have some environments, some societies where men are more aggressive than the women. Women are more docile. Homemakers. They're not out in the society, intermingling with the society. They kind of stay at home. They raise the children, nurture them, cultivate the children. Nothing wrong with that. But every society is different. Even within the same culture, even within the same culture, it's different. Because Umar's not talking about anybody other than Arabs. He's talking about Arabs. He said, we the people of Quraysh, the people of Mecca, we used to be more aggressive. Naglibu nisa'ana. We were more aggressive than our women. He said, but when we migrated to Medina, we found that the Ansar, right? Their women were more aggressive and assertive than they were. There's some cultural differences between the women and what each society requires. All right? So that within itself shows you that women were not monolithic in terms of their domestic cultivation. The way that women were cultured, the way that women were domestically nurtured, it was not monolithic. Meaning that they were not raised the same although they were all Arabs. You had Mecca, the women are one way, and Medina, the women are a completely different way. Pay attention because I'm going somewhere with this. All right? Or expected to be. Thank you, Sister Amina. Very good. Because if you go into an environment and women are very assertive, right? Not aggressive. Women are very assertive, especially African American women, which is where I'm going with this. In our society, all of the nonsense that black women have been through, African American women have been through, you're going to marry